quickly. My name's Dallas, this is Paul. We're going to be talking about building your robot. Quick show of hands, last year how many teams had one of these two robots, or well, yeah, not the clutch, but the flex robot, one of the kit bots type of thing? Okay, so that's what you started with, right? And I, as a coach, I sit down with my team. If my kids have never built a robot before, and I do my teams a little differently. I have 2 kids per team. I had like 18 teams. But if they've never built a robot before, I say you build one of these instruction bots. Okay, first thing, that's what you do to get yourself started. You to understand the parts, the techniques, and that sort of thing. Now, you've heard us not really give high praises and compliments to these things, not to take away from the designers. They're not necessarily meant to be the best robot, right? I mean, they're a starting point. We don't want to other countries, dish out instructions of here is the #1 world, winning robot, everybody else duplicate it sort of thing. We don't want that. So they give you something to start with to be able to score a few points maybe, and you can modify it from there. So I strongly encourage, like I said, I sit down with our kids. If they've never done anything, I make them do the instructions. If they have built a robot before in previous years, then we talk about, well, do they want to start with one of these or do they want to build something on their own? My job's not to keep them from failing. My job as a coach is to make sure they don't take too long to fail. I don't want them to spend all, month or many months trying to build up the robot only to be in the middle of the season they still don't even have anything that actually works yet, right? So that is my job, is to make sure, my motto, fail often but fail fast, okay? So,
if you're a new team and you've never built a robot before, definitely build one of these first, because you'll be driving it on like the second meeting or the third meeting. And that's hugely important because you're going to learn from operating the robot so much more than you are theorizing and taking weeks and weeks and weeks to build more complicated robots. You can always tear it apart and build another one. And if you've got multiple teams and you've got some advanced teams that have built 3 or 4 robots and custom robots, they can start in with something custom. If you got a team with lesser experienced students, they should definitely start by building one. It's literally should take 4 hours, maybe 5 with the clutch. It's more complicated to build it, get it to the point where it's operating on the field and actually see how it doesn't work right. Like first-hand experience.
So we can talk about, let's jump into, I guess, Paul, you want to talk about the different, from there, as far as we have these kit bots, and I'll go into a little bit of how to modify them and improve them, but the basic kind of different architectures of a robot.
Yeah, so what we tried to do here is just kind of say, okay, if you built an already robot, the off-the-shelf robot, the instruction robot, then you're going to decide let's build some kind of custom robot. There's lots of decisions to be made. Even before you start building stuff together, you have to make a lot of decisions on what you're going to do. For instance, in drivetrain, there's lots of different varieties of drivetrain. The tank drive or wheelchair drive with 4 wheels, 2 motors, and all the wheels are powered because of the gears. That's what's in the clutch bot and the flex bot and the claw bot, right? So this is the basic starting drivetrain. It has the advantages of it's easy, but it can't move side to side, right? And in fact, you see that this robot has Omni-Wheels on it, so it can move side to side. This one, even though this can only move forward and back under power, the ability to move side to side is actually pretty useful in some cases. For instance, if you get this robot in the corner, you try to turn this way, the wheels don't slide, and so the kids will sit there and just bury the robot in the corner and never get it out of the corner. Whereas this robot, if you try to turn it that way, the wheels slide away from the corner. So there's some differences between the tank drive with friction wheels versus Omni-Wheels. But in general, the tank drive, you can go forward and back, and then obviously if you power one set of wheels forward and one set backwards, you can make turns.
And one of the, maybe one of the first modifications you can do to this is change 4 of the wheels, or even just say the two of the wheels to Omni-Drive.
Yeah,
it helps it turn better. Because when this tries to turn, it's a lot of friction there. It actually, the physics behind it requires these wheels to skid. Sometimes this is called skid steering. Sometimes Your Bobcat type of thing drives like this. It is not a pretty thing, but it's brute force that gets the job done.
And it does another loose
One thing about that, again, a lot of times we've got the less experienced drivers, and with the Omni-Wheels on that, like that, so putting 2 Omni-Wheels on here, this robot will turn really fast. Which is great if you have a kid that can drive that. We don't all have those. Sometimes we need somebody, so this robot will turn slow, because you'll see, what you'll see in practice is they keep trying to line up to grab the cube. And the robot just keeps spinning back and forth because they can't stop it and get it lined up right. That's where we can say, well, actually we could use these rubber wheels. Robot's going to turn slower, may not get somewhere as fast, but you'll be able to line it up a little bit better. So there have been a couple cases where I've gone to events and say, actually try putting rubber wheels on that and maybe you can drive it better. And that made a big difference in how they're driving.
Driving technique is something we practice. We'll do things like stack up rings and kind of create a bull in a china shop type of obstacle course for them to go around. But the big thing with kids driving, watch them as they're doing it. Even record them and show them back to them. These joysticks, they're proportional. Okay? Proportional means it's not just 1 or 0, there's everywhere in between. But when they drive them like they're full-on, on-off switches. It's like being in a car with somebody whose the accelerator is either all the way down or the brake is all the way on. It's just not pleasant. And that's why a lot of kids drive. So really promote them to be smooth and fluid versus boom, 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 boom. When they turn up, they turn too far, so they turn back. Then it takes 3 turns to get them to where they're lined up. Try to be smooth.
One of the great things about the VEX's wheels is that the Omni-Wheels and the friction wheels are exactly the same diameter. They're only slightly wider for the Omni-Wheels versus the friction wheels. So I always have people I always recommend kids, if they're building it with friction wheels, leave space for them to convert to Omni-Wheels, because it's one of the easiest ways to change the drive characteristics of your robot. So plan for Omni-Wheels, maybe use friction wheels, maybe not. Maybe it's 2 friction, 2 Omni, maybe it's 4 Omni, maybe it's 4 friction. But it's the easiest thing to do. And when you build the clutch spot, the first thing you should do after the driving for a little bit is say, let's try 2 Omni-Wheels, and then let's try 4 Omni-Wheels, and just see how it drives. The characteristics of driving are going to be drastically different. And those are, because the parts are interchangeable, in that sense, they're super easy to switch in. So we've got a few more advanced drivetrains up here. Some of you guys may attempt some of this stuff, but you probably don't. I think at Worlds last year I saw 98% of the drives be all Omni or 2 Omni, 2 friction wheels tank drives.
This is not Worlds.
I know what I'm saying. What's competitive, right? The 5-wheel Omni-Drive, the H drive, costs you an extra motor, but it gives you sideways translation. Now this robot, and this is going straight back, could drive sideways. So that adds another design element, another functionality, another potential for moving around and adjusting a robot.
If you're trying to line up with things, it's much easier just to slide over a little bit.
Yep.
Or to pick something over and slide over here versus like pick it up, back, turn around, go, that sort of thing. Especially when it comes to autonomous programming, this makes things really nice.
Yeah, and
what's the orange little kind of pegs in the board? Will the middle Omni-Wheel get stuck in those?
Yeah.
Sometimes it definitely had a problem with the sticks before. The H drives struggled with that.
the difference is the sticks are continuous and the nubs are incontinuous. So we were at a camp a couple weeks ago, and people built edge drives and they got around the field. Occasionally got hung up, jostled a little bit, it kind of moved to the side a little bit and went faster. Not nearly as limiting as the terrain bars from last year, because they are just individual nubs.
And this is, it's a simple adaptation. The other thing I wanted to point out here, one of the problems with these kit bots is their wheelbase. It is very close, so they're very tipsy. People you want to spread these wheels out to give it a little more stability if you're picking up things. These aren't that heavy anymore, but as you start picking up things and moving around, you may want more stability. You see sometimes people add a bunch of gears in here to do it, but one quick simple thing is you can add some chain. That's a simple little kit to buy, and really makes the drive system simple and easy that way. So you can connect those.
I think the biggest obstacle that I've seen is the drivetrain. at competition. People are, they get to the modification stage and they modify everything above the drivetrains, but keep the same drivetrain, and they're wobbling all over, falling, tipping backwards. That is the first step, and probably the most important step, is making your drivetrain stable, wider, longer, faster.
Well, and strong and stable, it doesn't keep falling apart.
Right.
To that stuff, yeah.
So in the escalation of more complicated and more challenging drives, the X Drive takes 4 motors. Each of the drive wheels has a separate motor. You've got one, okay, great.
Here's one right here.
And because of that, they're all 4 Omni-Wheels. Each of those wheels can turn, and because they slide sideways, when they're all angled this way, all turn that direction, it moves that way. So you can actually slide in every direction very nicely with an X Drive. The downside, of course, is you have 6 motors to work with, you're using 4 on your drivetrain, whereas these other robots are using 2 on the drivetrain, or the X Drive uses 2.
That's the biggest disadvantage, I think, with the X Drive is you're using 4 motors. It is a little more complicated to build, and quite frankly, my kids do this a lot, but they copied this off of the high school kids, right? I mean, so they got these ideas from the high school kids that were doing this type of stuff years ago. But this drive here, this advantage uses 4 motors, but it's actually very powerful. It gets around because you have 4 motors that are fully being utilized for torque and drive. It's actually also faster than the equivalent H drive or other robot. You get a square root of 2 sort of gain in speed. So it is actually a really nice design. It also adds stability. Depending on the design, like in these cases, they have the wheels straight out in the corners. This is about the smallest. I mean, this wheelbase, this base here is actually, well, it's a little bigger than that one. They've made some that are like really small, and they're actually very stable. So.
Because the contact point is further in the corners.
Yeah, you're getting that contact point way up in the corner.
When you're talking about something tipping over, it's about the last contact point. And on a wheel, that last contact is in the center of the wheel. So you've got all this rounded part of the wheel, which is cantilevered over the floor, which doesn't help you from tipping. The next drive is still this way, and the contact point is further out near the edge. So it's less tipping. And then, I've seen X Drives, we've seen X Drives be competitive and it's possible. Last year's game, I think, really limited itself to X Drives because you could passively pick up the hubs all day long. This year, I think that you're going to get in trouble to dedicate 4 motors onto your drive system and only have 2 for actuating stuff. But it's possible you'll see those. And then the Kiwi-Drive, 3-wheel Omni-Drive, is kind of taking that to another step forward. Is now you've got 3 wheels at 60-degree area, 120-degree angles, whatever, that have the same situation. But the advantage is here, there's 1 less motor. The disadvantage is it's way tippier, right? The tip point, the contact point is on a diagonal, so the center of the mass can easily pass that one and tip over on the diagonal.
4-wheelers are good, 3-wheelers are.
They don't even make the 3 wheels anymore.
So, now it also is complicated with the math for driving because the ratio, if you're trying to strafe to the side, the ratio of the bottom wheel turning to the ratio of the top wheels is funny. So, save this for your advanced kids because and you can get them to figure out the programming. You can teach them how to go about figuring out how to program it to do this stuff. It just takes, it'll take them time. It'll take them a couple
I've never seen at any level a competitive 3-wheel robot.
I was hoping one of my teams would do it last year.
I've never seen it.
Functional.
I think you could have made this robot here with the 3rd one just in the back. It would have been pretty reasonable. I think they would have needed to lighten it up or whatnot. I was kind of hoping somebody might, because because that is the disadvantage is you only have 2 motors.
The problem is a team that's advanced enough to take on that thing is also enough that they want to be competitive. They don't want to try to blaze a trail.
This might be a fun robot to build, not for competition. You can actually find the design for this on the VEX website.
And so it's
On your free time.
Yeah. When the kids want something to do on their own.
They're on instructions how to build it.
Yep.
So the things that the kids learn from building, even if they don't use it in competition, they're still useful. Okay, so we have some design choices on how the design is done. We hate to say change width, change how fast the robot turns, so the wider the wheels are, the more bigger circle they have to transcribe to get a turn, so you turn slower. If you tuck the wheels in real tight, then you're gonna turn a lot faster, right? So,
Faster turning is not necessarily.
not necessarily a good thing. In fact, oftentimes it's a bad thing.
Usually, yeah, it actually.
Because it makes you miss, as Steve mentioned, you drive past and you drive past. It's much better to slowly get accurate to the point than to drive and overshoot and come back and overshoot and then finally get there. So, the decision on the width also should really have a lot to do with stability and the size of the robot. So I think almost every robot I saw last year built their robot driving this way in the rectangle. I love VEX IQ compared to VEX VRC. In the high school level, you build in a cube. So there's no choice on whether I'm going to be a sideways or a frontways robot. But in VEX IQ, you have the choice. And last year, unfortunately, it didn't make any sense. You only get to pick up one object at a time. So why would it make sense to be broad, drive around broadly so I can pick up more than one object? You can't pick up more than one object. And even pushing more than one object in front of a broad robot ended up being not very good because of the train barriers. So last year's game literally killed the sideways robots. I hope to see a bunch of sideways robots this year, at least some, because you can pick up more than one cube. And so a broad side robot that drives forward and back on this rectangle might make sense to be able to pick up multiple cubes. I heard Jake spill the beans over there, I'll just pick up 4 cubes at one time. I think that's his design.
One of the things that I've actually seen done is to make a robot that is 11 inches square. And so that way they can start it whichever direction they want to in the starting square based on what their strategy is. So if they want to just start by going straight forward, they can do that. If they want to start facing this way to go grab some cubes, they can do that. So they can, again, make it so it's wide or make it so it's or so it can be square. Actually, a lot of times you can make it so it has an arm that comes down, but the robot will start with the arm up so that it fits into the square. That was close. So it can almost start facing sideways. And then they have more options on their strategy again.
I'll come back one slide, I think we can tell all that stuff. Okay, yeah, change how easy the robot turns, but again, so drivetrain width, drivetrain length, so that's where you're putting the wheels. It's going to really contribute to how the robot drives, as well as, maybe more importantly, we can put up here, how stable the robot is. Like we talked about these things really want to tip over very easily. So much so that they even created some little anti-tip over bars here to help you from falling over. But those bars are the kind of things that get hung up and caught on the little nubs or even hung up on some of the platforms. So if you can build your wheels further out, then you don't have to have those extra pieces that are going to keep you from falling over. So decisions on the drivetrain, width, length, type of wheels we already talked about a bunch. I think we covered all the road wheels are the standard, which is Omni-Wheels. And then 2 versus 4-wheel drive. If all of the basic robots are 4-wheel drive, they have a set of gears that translate the motor power to both the front end and the back wheels. I've had teams in the past who built 2-wheel drive robots because it was hard to get the motor connection for the front wheels and the back wheels. But that will work as long as the weight distribution is okay. The problem with a 2-wheel drive robot is if you pick something up that's heavy and it's lifting up here and you drive the wheels in the back, most of the friction is going to be between your front wheels and the floor. And so all this added weight here is going to cause the robot to want to rise up a little bit, and it may make the point where the back wheels aren't in contact with the floor enough to where they'll slip. And so when they go to accelerate, they'll spin the wheels and have trouble making some moves. Also, if another robot happens to break, which this robot will no doubt break big chunks off, and you get underneath there, now you're high-centered, and you can't even drive away from it. So you're stuck. VEX IQ allows the kids to set the control now and go get the robot, bring it back and restart it. But still, the 2-wheel drive choice versus 4-wheel drive, I always recommend 4-wheel drive. Just safer for drive.
Okay. So, we're going to talk about some of the issues with, and especially like some of these kit box and things like that. They're not very structurally sound. I know, last year, how many times these kids come out of a match and this side is practically pulled off or something like that. They're, things aren't stuck on there very well, and or they're in the match. I could get it back in there.
and now they're in the match, or they're getting ready to start the match, and you look and you see them already, they're half pulled out and parts like that, right? So you really want to look at the structural strength, structural integrity of it, if it break, again, failing's great, failures are awesome, but you got to learn from your failures. So when something breaks, why did it break? What can I do so it doesn't break again, right? I don't have a problem with kids making mistakes. I have a problem not learning from those mistakes and making them again and again and again. So something breaks, in a match, maybe it's a fluke, maybe it's not, you should evaluate it. If it breaks more than once, it breaks twice, 3 times, okay, what can you do to fix this? Or I've seen, it was just amazing, even just pathetically last year, how many people used rubber bands just to, wrap around something to hold it together, right? Well, I guess it's legal, but you can, you come up with something sort of thing. One of the big things that is really not great about these robots is they use plastic shafts, and they use plastic shafts on the wheels. First off, the motors have enough torque to where you get them just right, and you can actually just twist these shafts right in half if you do things wrong or whatever else. They're not that strong. But also, they have 2 problems. One, they're using plastic shafts, they bend, they flex, they're not that strong, but they're also only supported on one side, right? So when it comes to just general design, here's my big shaft. Right? So when it comes to general design and dealing with shafts with some gears and whatever else, you really want to support the shaft, out on the ends, on each side. With a lot of these designs, and I see a lot of kids, they'll stick one, stick, and they'll stick a shaft in there, and put a lock collar on each side and a wheel on the other end. And, so you have this poor little stick, it's about this big, and you have this giant wheel over here, and you have all the way to the robot, and this little, stick over here. You take, and you can sit there with the kids and you can work this out. It's great, because this is simple little math. You go on the whiteboard and you draw it out and say, okay, I got a wheel out here, I got a gear, I got whatever out here sort of thing, and this is, 1.5 inches out here, and I got a 1/4 inch wide stick over here supporting this. If I put, 5 pounds of force down here, I'm getting, if this is, say, 1 inch and this is a 1/4 inch, I got 5 pounds times 4, you go through the leverage ratio, these are, simple levers type of thing. So now I have like 20 pounds of force on this little piece of plastic with a square shaft, like a point on the edge. These things, they just don't last, they don't survive, they don't work well.
So one of the things I will do to explain this, instead of using 20 pounds of shaft,
well, no, it's a 5-pound robot, right? It's a 5-pound.
what I will do is have the student stand here, put your feet together,
Yeah.
put your feet together, and then I'll just show them, I can push on you, and you kind of lose your balance. Now if you put your feet apart, go ahead. Now when I push on them, and I'll do this with the student, and they can see, I don't usually push them and knock them down. Yeah, but then they can see how having the points farther apart helps with the axle, it can help with the robot the same way. And that's something that they all have fun doing, to see, oh yeah, well yeah, so now I see what you mean.
Well, hold that there, and then, and have one student, push down on that. Try to hold that. Okay, well now take 2 hands, put them both together, okay? Well, that's better, right? Okay, now do it, right? So they can see that difference of, you spread those sticks apart there, and you really support the whole shaft and the wheel, make the whole system more stable, more reliable, more consistent, that sort of thing. So you saw kind of like in the drivetrain with the chain and stuff like that, you can see how they're pulled apart. Here, for example, great example where it's supported on each side. This is great. This is like ideal, the most, the best that you want sort of thing. Now, the thing to make sure of is that this stick is then supported by something. I see a lot of kids that kind of have a stick on the outside, but then it's, it just bends up on the side here. They stick it over here, and it just bends up because there's nothing supporting it. If you look here, the great thing about this design, it has a stick going all the way across, right there. That keeps this whole frame rigid from flexing and things like that. So really work on that, because if they start doing discrete parts, like this up here, you know, they did it discreetly because they probably want the cube to be able to come into this area or whatever else. But if you were able to bring this one stick all the way across, it'll be much stronger. They did that in the back, so they were able to afford to kind of do that here up in the front. So the plastic shafts, I strongly recommend buying additional metal shafts. The kit doesn't really come with enough metal shafts. You'll find that out pretty quickly. The plastic shafts are nice because they have flanges, but again, just really avoid them in a lot of competitions. They take abuse.
Any question?
Yes?
So just a comment. One downside to the eventually using the metal shafts, my team discovered, is that if you put those in the wheel and you drive them all season at high speed with high torque, you can start to round out the centers of your wheels. So we actually started adding 2x2 lock plates or gears to help, you know, sort of reinforce that.
So actually, if you look inside these Omni-Wheels, my kids all, because an Omni-Wheel, like you look here, an Omni-Wheel's not round, it's made up of a bunch of little sections. So as these bend over, this robot now hops like this every time it drives around, adding the 2x2 inside here with its square, and they even put some standoffs so they can integrate a lock collar inside there, right? Now they got a really strong, stiff wheel type of thing with an extra lock collar in there too. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm impressed with how well these things do hold up when they're reasonably designed. It is kind of amazing to me. So, you know, you get some of these good teams, they're running autonomous programs just day and night. All this robot is doing is just repeating the same program time and time again. It is amazing how well they survive. Okay.
Yeah, so drivetrain gearing. So the ability for the motor to drive the wheels, the VEX designed the motors so that they could direct drive into the wheels. So like the cobot, the basic robots, the motor drives the shaft that goes right in the wheel. So the speed of the motor, the 100% speed of the motor, is naturally, you know, got enough torque and it moves the robot around reasonably well, but not as fast as possible. So you can always change gearing on the drivetrain. You see, actually, this robot doesn't have any gearing, but they put the motors up high and put a separate sprocket that would drive the drive sprocket. So they actually had, at one point, I think, a faster gear ratio here and switched. This is a camp robot from a couple weeks ago. They found that they didn't like it when it was too fast. So speed isn't always the greatest thing because these motors have one amount of torque. And so if you've got really good high-end speed, you have very low-end acceleration. And so while you build a robot that can get across the field very fast, as it first starts, it takes a little struggle to get up to speed. And that means when you're making any turns or making any alignment or making any short adjustments, it's slow at that. And so is it good to be really fast but slow at the starting point? Probably not, because there's a lot of starting and stopping and moving and turning and picking up of objects in a robotic competition. Very little drag racing where you're doing long distance drives across the field. Now in this game there are a couple of exceptions. Obviously you take the reds over there and the blues over here. And so you might want to try to pick a balance of, I want to be a little faster, top end, but still have some good low end torque for a good, you know, quick response at the
And that's where some advanced programming could come into play too. You may
you can't program more torque out of
You
it.
can't program more
It's
torque.
sluggish because you're asking for 100% speed, they can't give you 100% speed because it's geared so slow that it's working hard to get there.
But if you want the slow speed to be fine and sensitive, when you're trying to pick up.
You can make some adjustments to
and stuff like that.
the B.
And then, so yeah.
We can fill that out. Arm or claw gearing. I think that was your test, that was your accident.
Arm or claw gearing. Okay, well, actually what I did is I made this.
Oh,
one.
yeah.
Okay. And I don't want to really get into gear ratios and whatever else, but I just wanted to at least have this slide up here. You can see, you know, I have a little crank there for the input, which is in a sense be the motor, and then there's the output gear. I have this set up. I put these. I have these pictures for the kids. Have these kids build these, and then I have a little worksheet with, you know, what the input and output speeds and stuff like that is. This middle example is a very common example where the kids think they're getting more gear performance or something like that. They're adding a third gear in here now. So this kind of clearly shows to them that it really doesn't add anything. It does change the direction of the output, but it doesn't add anything else. You can see the basic gear down there.
And one of the great things you get when you build the basic robot is you find that the lift motor goes into the number 1 gear, the smallest gear, and it drives the biggest gear so that it slows that motion down. And the thing I always tell all the kids, every one of my kids will tell you this, that it's you get speed or you get strength, but you never get both.
Right.
So if you want it to be strong, it has to be slow. If you want to be fast, it will be weak. You never get speed and strength, you get the trade-off.
So that's why I put down there at the bottom. Output has 15 times the torque, but it has 1/5 the speed, or 1/15 the speed, right? So.
Always trade speed for strength, you never get both.
And
The motors by themselves have a limited amount of torque that they can limit. So your speed times strength is limited. So you can only push speed into strength, or push strength to speed and trade them off. You can't get both.
so I thought, let's see how well this is. I thought I'd bring a couple examples. This is, you know, one of my teams, they were tired of their arm constantly breaking. This is last year when you had to hang and whatever else. So they built this, you know, piece of a arm that, you know, would survive a war. But you can see here some of the, you know, the things that they did here with the gearing, as far as how the gears are supported on each side. Notice the arms actually run straight into the dark peg. There's actually, they're using 4 long pegs here to, I'll count 4 long, they're otherwise called 2 but I don't know. They're using 4 long pegs in here. That's actually one thing I wanted to bring out. A lot of teams, I see them when they go sticking their big gear to their stick, and especially if you've got 2 stages of gearing and things like that. A lot of them only use those 4 center pegs right there in the center. And I see them rip out all the time, especially last year with the hanging and things like that. Whereas these outer pegs here offer a lot more strength and really promote the kids using those, you know, to get as many pegs in there. And also I see people using like standoffs and things so that there's a lot of distance. Well, that just promotes it all to twist and things like that. So really, you know, try to promote getting these in there. Here's another design of a bunch of stages of gears designed to, you know, be strong. And actually one thing that's kind of neat about this is it's extremely smooth. These kids, you guys notice those little dinky flat washers in the kits? Most people don't use them, but if you've got things that need speed and you want smooth, those actually space those gears out between the sticks so they don't rub against each other and stuff. They're really useful for that. So you can get some really clean, smooth movement with that type of thing.
Let me show you something here. One tricky thing that you can run into with these gears, see how they have little marks in them? You can turn them and they don't necessarily line up quite right. If you make sure to line up these holes, make sure the kids line up the holes on these. You know, with this, if you turn this, well, you see how it's got six pins around it. If you turn it 90 or 45, 90 degrees, the gears will not, the teeth won't line up. Actually, the biggest problem is if I have it so that these hashes are facing opposite directions. Then when I put the gears, the teeth are off just a tiny bit. And so that can really be tricky because the gears all of a sudden don't line up.
Keep your arm balanced, that sort of thing.
So when we're trying to do this, where we have the arm is on one axle and the drive is on another axle, if you don't have these gears so they're lined up straight, the gears aren't going to mesh, and it's going to fight itself, and sooner or later it's going to rip out the center holes on those gears. So that's one thing as a teacher that you can pay attention to. Say, well, did you get all the gears lined up straight? Make sure that they're matched the same way, because if they're the wrong direction, that's where you...
So all the hashes should go the same direction.
That's what I tend to do. You can line it up different ways, but that's the easiest one, is to make sure all the hashes are facing the same way, and lined up right next to each other.
On the smaller gears, they don't have those hashes, so you can look for the little teeth, like the 36 tooth one says 36T printed in on the gear. If you just bet those, then they'll be the same. You think about it, these are injection molded parts, so when they come out of the mold, each are theoretically the same, but once you rotate them some certain amount of degree, they're potentially not the same. So if you make sure that you can keep them oriented the same way, you can avoid those pitfalls.
So one of the things I want to talk about, kids have their robot, you know, they do this, it moves up and for example, you know, they're trying to, well, it needs to go higher sort of thing. You look at this one and you think, oh, you know, it needs to go higher. They want it to go higher. Well, so what do they want to do? They want to rip their whole robot apart and then build a new arm. Wait a minute, how does that go? I mean, it took us 3 minutes to tear it apart and it'll take them 3 days to put it back together, right? So one of the things that I very quickly do with the kids is our high school team actually has a bunch of these VEX IQ kits. And we use these VEX IQ kits to model joints. It is a great way of being able to model mechanisms really quickly for the kids to be able to try, experiment, and see how things work. And so what I'll do with the kids is, you know, they'll be talking about, oh, they need it to, you know, it just needs to go up just a little bit more, so we're gonna, you know, either make this taller, or we're gonna make this longer, or whatever else. It's like, okay, stop here. Let's model this first. And so I'll start sticking together, you know, I'll grab a couple sticks, and I'll be like, okay, so let's model this. So we got this robot. My example here is a little big. I can get rid of that one. So it's like, so before they tear apart their robot, let's build a model that basically models the dynamics of this type of thing. And so here's now the model of the robot, and we got a joint, and that joint is, let's just say roughly, say right there. That arm is, actually that's pretty good as far as its length of the arm. And so maybe that's what all I'll give the kids. So I actually snap this together, and it's like, okay, so model the rest. You got your other part up here. So I'll let the kids, and I put this together because I knew I wasn't going to bring a kid apart. But you know, they let them figure out the rest of it, so then they can model and put together. So they can model and put this system together and try this out. And so,
up in 2 minutes. Hurry up. Let's go. Let's go.
So you know, you see, right? They figure this out, figure it out. Now, this is something very easy where they can experiment with. Okay, let's see what happens when I move this down like there. And they look and say, oh, well, this thing now, it tips even further down. Well, I want it to tip up. How do I do that? What do I do? And so they can sit there and they can play with all these dimensions really quickly and easy. And you know, what they may even do is build 2 of these models. Build one of them that matches their robot and stays there. So then that one's golden, they don't mess with it, because they also quickly lose the equation of even this. And then they start going through and changing things, and you know, maybe, oh, we move this down here a little bit, and now this stick, you know, this is our claw. I should have made this one a little shorter, but you know, I get the idea. So you can move these around and then see, oh, look, now I made, you know, this shorter, this longer, it moves different, does whatever. So this is really quick ways for them to experiment with, you know, how do I change the mechanics of this without ripping the whole robot apart, right? And so they can prove this idea, get this approved with all their partners, and then they can, you know, figure out what to make the changes and how to do it here on the
And that's
robot.
what you just said with partners. If you got kids who are like, one says, well, I want to build one way, one says, I want to build a way, then you say, okay, both of you go build prototypes, just show us how it's going to work, right? And then you convince your teammates which your way is better than the other way, right? With a few parts and pins, you can build prototype mechanisms and get work through those challenges of.
And this is the way you can convince the kid, the team, or the one partner that has this great idea, and he can't convince all the rest of his partners because, well, yeah, they don't see it, they don't buy it, whatever. And you don't, you know, who am I to say who's right and who's wrong, sort of thing. So let them try it out, and then, you know, they build their little hook on there, you know, like last year they built their hook, they go over there, they try it, oh yeah, whoops, that doesn't work, you know, whatever, okay. So that, you know, they build these prototypes without ripping apart their whole robot. Then when they prove this, then they can kind of, you know, all agree and then make those changes. So, but we do this, you can see this. And then the other thing is, these are, you know, this mechanism here was built years ago. And it just sits in my classroom as a prototype for kids to look at. Oh, you know, and then get their ideas. Here's a, I guess we got this. We could jump to that next slide. Other band looking back. I guess we're really jumping forward. We've got the 4 bars, 6 bar elements in there. Relation.
You know.
Yeah, and that's just kind of what I was talking about. But, you know, here's an example. This is a reverse bar mechanism where the point of this is as this goes up and down, the claw being here stays fairly straight. You know, it doesn't pitch out real far and swing back and things like that. So, but you get these little mechanisms, and then even just building really small ones up, you know, just building a really small one with the kids. Like this, that, you know, shows them the concepts, have this stuff around and lets them see how these things work and what their possibilities, what they can do. Okay, gear ratios, rubber bands real quickly. Rubber bands are great to, you know, offset the arm. You see them on here and stuff to be able to support the arm, support the weight. Rubber bands do their work. They store energy when you stretch them. They do work when they change and shrink in dimensions. So one of the big things, kids are always trying to look on their robot and they're figuring out, okay, I put a rubber band here, put it there, tie it around, you know. It's actually kind of a challenging thing to do. But the thing that you can, and kids in high school is horrible about this, but they will, you know, I'll see kids with 50 rubber bands and they're stretched around, they're doing this, where it's like, you're just mangling your shaft. There's not, if you look at the arm when it's down and you look at the arm when it's up, what is the difference in the distance, the length of that rubber band? If there's only a 1/4 of an inch difference in length of that rubber band, it's not doing much work. So it's a simple way with your kids, you can have them measure what's the rubber band length in this position, what's the rubber band length in this position, that gives them an idea, something quantitative that you can tell whether that rubber band is doing much work or not.
And do some calculations, do a sketch, put it in your notebook, talk to the judge.
Yeah, I mean, you can do the, you can just simply look at the difference and record that as some quantitative number. You could actually then look at what the, you know, measure this on a scale, look at the force, do some other, you know, do some pretty cool calculations if they're older and things like that, so. Okay, controlling robot.
I'll take this real quick. So in general, the different ways to control the robot are the standard 2-stick TechPoint, where, you know, the left stick and the right stick control the left and right side. So you push forward, tilt back, right, to make the robot. That's the standard built-in driver control. Also built into the driver control system is one joystick version of that. So the single joystick, either the left or the right, which goes front, back, right, and left in one joystick. And then there's a more advanced version to split one stick, where you go forward and back with your right stick and you go right and left with your left, or vice versa. And that one allows you to more easily go straight back. Last year's game, I had some teams that did that, really happy about it, because when you placed your hub down and you had to drive straight back without knocking the hub off, all the teams that are trying to drive straight back with their 2 sticks tend to meander off and knock a lot of hubs off. But when you have to split one stick, you're going to drive straight back with your single stick. It'll always drive straight that direction because there's no turning on that stick. So the difficulty with these sticks is they're completely, as you said, proportional. But that means that if, you know, straight forward is here, but it's very easy to push forward at 20% left and not realize it. Of course, the kids that don't have a lot of experience driving, you know, joysticks and stuff. So, you know, there's some choices as to how you're going to control your robot with the joystick control that might lend itself better to the game, one game or another. This game maybe isn't as needful to be straight forward back.
What are the default choices in the robot brain? I know that 2-joy, 1-joy are in there. Is split one in there?
No. The default choices are TechPoint, 2 joysticks, and then there's left stick or right stick, which are the 2 versions of the.
But the reality is you shouldn't care. We're going to go over
It
that.
can be programmed. The programming is supposed to stick is
We're gonna try and wean everybody off of driver control. Really, because it's great, quick, but then all of a sudden you really hit limitations. And you get all these teams that are a year, 2 years into programming, or even half season into their robots, and they can't make changes because driver control, because now they have to actually program something. So we're gonna try and show you some really quick, simple ways of programming something. But this is a big area of contention with students, okay, and teammates. I want it this way, they want it this way, I'm used to this, my Xbox does it this way, my PlayStation does it that way, all that sort of stuff. This is a great way for them to learn to, figure things out, work together, and that sort of thing. And, who's to say who's right and who's wrong? When it comes to right and wrong in some things, and kids are, not quite getting it sometimes, I'll record them when they're controlling their joystick. When they're driving, I'll sit there with my phone and record their driving. And then I like, all the kids that like the tank drive, they like to steer like this. Well, when you watch them, how many of them are actually moving the sticks this way when they're trying to go left, and moving the sticks this way when they're going right, type of thing. And it's like, well, then why don't you just program your stick to do that? Because that's what you are doing, even though you don't want to, type of thing. Yes.
So one of the things, especially as you mentioned that it's proportional, right, on the sticks. One of the things we found last year, especially with some of our younger drivers, is when we wanted them to go full out straight forward or full out straight back, they would always kind of, okay, well, I'm going to tilt them both this way, especially with a tank drive kind of setup, right? So they would go through and kind of tilt, and they'd be like, well, the robot's going really slow. What's the matter with the robot? Let's tear it apart, right? So what we ended up doing, right, we actually gave a bit of positive feedback where if you're giving 100% to your motors, you can actually, just the 2 LED lights, have those light up when they're 100%, either way of the stick, right? Full scale deflection. That way it's like, are you going, nope, you're not.
I had one teammate, he programmed, because his other teammate was just going full throttle all the time, and he tried to write a program where at 100% the motor stopped. so we forced him to, and he didn't actually complete the program, but he was just so frustrated with his partner because he was just so jerky in his movements. I'm going to do that.
And in general, just pick a mode and practice with it, because the kids that don't like two-stick, you practice for 3 months with it, they'll be good. You don't need to, this choice will not end your team season by choosing the wrong.
Change is what's difficult, and so you send the kids down, one way, and and again, this is where I let my kids fail however they want. They program this, and if they want this, button over here to make the robot turn right, then I let them program it that way. And I've had parents, like really angry at me that I would let their kids show up at a tournament and their robot doesn't even work. And it's like, well, it does work. It's just kind of funny in the way that it works. And this is how they discussed. They both agreed this is what they wanted to do. And but we had 6 times throughout that season, so they got to iterate. And they fixed that. So, but yeah, and practice will tend to really make it perfect. Ready to go next? Okay. Manipulation.
We've hit on a lot of stuff, so we're going quick here because we're running out of time. Intake, passive versus active. This is the case for all of them. You can either drive underneath something with some forks and lift it up, or you can grab it with something. And so there'll be design decisions about that. As we've already talked, a passive intake won't allow you to get this cube up here because of the height restriction. So is it a completely no-go? No, not necessarily, because there's only one object there, and there are going to be other teams at tournaments that can do that. So it's possible you'll see teams win tournaments with a passive intake, because they got a partner who can lift the high cube onto the platform. It's only one of the 7 cubes. Obviously, with an active, you spin the motor. You have to have a motor that's doing something there, and you probably should take a little more time for that motor to close up and grip on whatever it's gripping on. So those are design decisions, choices that have to be made. For you as coaches, your idea is to, put the options in front of the kids and help them make a decision. And there's no wrong decision, right? There's options for both ways. If they choose the wrong one and then they go to a tournament, they realize there's other better options out there, they can change, right? So I'm a big fan of letting them, like Dale said, let them fail. Get to something where they can compete, go out and compete, see what's gonna work, what's not gonna work, and then evolve from there. So there's a whole bunch of different lists, we have a bunch of those. You can Google in those things and or find them on YouTube, you find a whole bunch of examples of them. It's not hard to find that kind of stuff online. And then plowing on the bottom, Steve mentioned earlier, the easiest way to move anything around the field is not lift it up, it's to just push it around. But these little orange nubs that are all over the field do make that a problem in this game. So if you're building a robot and you don't have a field to practice on, let me tell you right now, you should plan on, if you're going to take this red cube and put it over there, you're going to have to pick it up. You're not going to be able to push it. There's too much of a mess of pins in between there.
You'd be able to pull it last year successfully and pull those hubs over those bars.
Possibly, because if you hook it on the top and you pull like this, it'll want to do like this, but it depends on how your hooks are, right? The cubes, or the hubs from last year had to be hooked in just the right way, right? You end up seeing, basically every robot had the stingers, I heard them we call them draggers, right? So there's probably a shape that you can engage the top of these things and drag them over. That'd be okay. And then ball manipulation, same thing, intake, active versus passive. So this game is using the exact same balls as Bank Shot, which was a game from about 5 years ago. 4 years ago? 5 years? No. Crossover, Ringmaster, next level, 4 years. Google Bank Shot YouTube videos. There's tons of teams figure out really clever ways to pick up the balls on the exact same situation on the field. They had buckets they would ram into the side and the balls would pop past some rubber bands and go into buckets. They had big conveyors, sets of conveyors, lots of conveyors, and gobble balls up all along the side of the robot. There's lots of good options for picking up balls. I don't recommend starting with those because those are complicated, and we already talked about how the ball is a secondary contention, but it is possible that the kids are going to say, well, we really want to drive these balls. Go ahead, let them try it, let them fail. Or maybe they'll come up with a great idea and it'll be a good partner robot for any robot. I heard already once, and I'm going to second the thing, is that most of the tournaments in Indiana will be won with scores of 100 plus a few points. Right? You only get 110 in this game to win any tournaments until probably the state championship. Maybe some of the higher competitive later season tournaments will be more than 110. But if you can go through the bit and knock out 100 points by getting all the cubes in place, you do really well.
And as mentioned about kids watching YouTube, there's fantastic resources there on YouTube. This is a great opportunity to talk to the administrator or the IT person to get YouTube unblocked for your classroom or from wherever, right? Because the kids need it is a valuable resource to be able to, and the kids like to post their own stuff too, and showing what their robots do and things like that. Anything else there? Okay.
Nope.
General notes. Oh, I wanted, triangles are strong. So I wanted to just mention in your design and your build, you got these arms, they're up here. I think I had some other sticks here. You go sticking a triangle there between these joints, and it really, makes things strong and stiff. There's just no movement on that sort of thing. So I encourage you everywhere. You can see this has a triangle in there. A lot of your designs, you build them with triangles. They're strong. Keep in mind, it's very easy for you to think you're making a triangle and not make a triangle. You take this stick and you mount it with a standoff that's 1 inch long, and it pretty much defeats the whole purpose of the triangle. You really got to look and have the kids, when they're sitting there and something is still wobbly, well, I put a triangle like you said, and you go and you look, well, okay, now when I move this, what's moving? Well, it's moving right over there, and it's like, well, because your triangle is changing shape. You're not allowing it. So, you really want to look, sometimes people will, well, I can't get this down there, so they stick a stick up here, and then they stick their triangle there. Well, that doesn't really, or that just creates a parallel, something like that. So,
I think you hit on all these. Set for number 2, the part breaks more than once, it needs to be designed. I'm always, in fact, the first time it breaks, I'm like, can you put more pins in it? Put more pins in it before we go back together. Unless you've got a match now. It's a minute from now still, more pins. And then if it breaks again, it's more plates and more pins, more connectors and more pins. It's always more connection, because when something breaks, other than when it's knocked off the table, super extreme, loads. When it just breaks on the field of play, that means it needs to be designed differently, more or less.
And there's designs with your gussets where you can stick a gusset, you stick in the gusset here, on the side, it holds it, supports it on the outside, but you can see it can pull out. If you're doing something on the inside, and you're able to put a gusset on the outside of this in a certain way, the way that it's pegged, it won't actually be able to come out. Sorry. Connectors, they call them connectors. I come from industrial robots and stuff, they call them gussets, all the
Corner connectors, any kind of corner connector.
Yeah, the corner connectors. But you can look at those designs and, is there a way that you're not just relying on the strength of pegs to hold it in there, that it actually gets captured or something of that nature? I want to mention here, encourage your kids when they go to tournaments to look at other robots, see the robots that are good. Go talk to those teams, ask them about their robots. Both kids like to talk about their robots, and two, it's good to get these kids to learn to talk to each other, communicate, and bounce ideas off of each other. Ask them, I always like tell my kids I want 2 pictures, type of thing from you, and I don't care if you got to borrow your mom's phone or whatever else type of thing. Go around and ask people, hey, I really like this cool, hook you got here. Can I take a picture of that type of thing? Right? Learn from what everybody else around you is doing. I always encourage, after every tournament, kids start to write down 5 things that work well and 5 things that they can do to improve. The next practice, that's where I kind of go over. We prioritize all these things and what they're, what they can do to improve. Put down their priorities, estimate the times, and develop a game plan. And then the big thing here is don't just make your season one tournament. This is about, like I said, I promote failure, right? This is about going out there, this did not work at all. We thought it was going to work. We ended up, dead last sort of thing or whatever else. Great. Go back, you got another tournament in 3 weeks. What can we do? Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, so that's where I'm at, where kids came up with ambitious designs, they went to a tournament, it was a disaster, it didn't go well, they came back and changed design, again, with another tournament, didn't go as well, better but not as well, and through the season, improved their design, improved the functionality, and got to the point where they were, far more to be learned from that.
Some of these robots that these kids end up with are just incredible, and I think a lot of other coaches and other people look at this like there's no way a kid built that. And it's like, well, if you would have solved the 10 iterations and you look at this mechanism, where this came from and whatever else, it's just incredible. I mean, I know I had a team, they copied, an elementary team copied one of their mechanisms in the crossover at one of their tournaments, and then became #1 ranked in the world for skills, based on taking that design and
I think that was taken by your son copy, yes.
Yeah, I made the mistake of sitting down over the holidays, and he had this design that he was talking about, and I kind of was looking, hey, you're ranked 400th in the, or I don't know, 400th in the world, and 30th in the state, and if you get your robot to do what you say it's going to do with this new design that you took a picture of, and you program it to do it, you'll be #1 in the world. And day and night, that's all they did. Program. They were.
And you can see his reaction to it working on YouTube.
Yeah, there's a good little video of it. The first, it's so sad that when we get this to program. He spent I just showed him the basics. Here's how you make a move, here's how you make it turn, here's how you set your position, whatever else. And I went to bed, and he stayed up till like 3 a.m. in the morning. He comes back, and he's like, I got it to work, and he goes and shows, and did the whole half side, did everything. He's just like so excited, like, cool, show me your program. He sits down at the computer, and I forgot to save it.
Actually, that's great. Let's do it again. You learn probably more stuff.
He did it all again, and then I get a phone call. The computer's locked up. I can't. We're at the high school days. It's like,
It's going to happen. You're going to override the program. It's always a learning opportunity. And he can't wait better for having to do it twice than having to hold it down.